But first, Matt, what is this Andrew Sullivan clip? Take us down memory lane.
This is Christopher Hitchens and Andrew Sullivan. I believe in 2000. I have the date actually here.
Sometimes we go in memory lane to highlight a great leader like Fred Hampton as an example. Other times we go into memory lane to do a fun clip from Christopher Hitchens, and other times, Andrew Sullivan.
So this is sort of a combination of the latter two. This is Hitchens arguing with Sullivan, and you can kind of see why Hitchens might have leaned to the right towards the end if he's hanging out with people like Sullivan a lot. I mean, he hung out with a lot of people, but drank. But this dispute over Israel and basically the UN, and they get into a lot of different debates that I think have a lot of relevance to now. And I think if we had Ben Burgess on, he might notice some fallacies in Andrew Sullivan's
what year is this? Do you have? Do you know?
2002, November 8th.
So this is when Hitchens has already started moving to the right after September 11th. Okay.
It starts with a question from a foreign exchange student.
Okay.
One of the reasons for Bush to make a possible war to Iraq is that Iraq violates UN's resolution. Of course, UN's resolution should be respected by every country. But there are still some countries in the world who that violate UN resolutions. For example, Israel. What was U.S. government's attitude to it?
Thanks. Thanks, Professor. We get the point of the question. Do you have a comment on that last question from the
Professor Yamin is, of course, right. I think the Israelis have probably racked up the largest number of UN condemnations for the appalling mistreatment of the non-Jewish population, the other population of Palestine. And it's now admitted by everyone, and even the president himself has become the first American president to use the words Palestinian and state in the same sentence and in opposition to one another. That there are two peoples in Palestine and that there should be a two-state solution. But in the meantime, it seems that Israel is to suffer no penalty for its repeated violations, not just of the resolutions, but of the rights that the UN stands for and embodies. And this is a very serious negation, in my view, and it's the thing that threatens to jeopardize the whole project of American sponsorship of regime change in the region. Because if seen as the military ally of a racist bully and killer like Ariel Sharon, the whole appeal of the American project is to that extent diminished.
Of course,
it's a very, very serious problem indeed that the professor has identified.
I didn't catch that he was foremost concerned about how this would affect America's regime changes.
This is how it would affect the strategy for the invasion of Iraq. He is right, though. George W. Bush, first one to say Palestinian state explicitly. And yes, I mean, especially, again, this was the other paradox of Hitchens. Seth Meyers saying to Meghan McCain that you should be able to criticize Israel without being called an anti-Semite is like, that can actually happen now. I mean, if you came up in the Hitchens time, watching Hitchens say this, even as he was, pushing this horrific plan and policy in Iraq, was still like unheard, like the only person in mass media who got to say it.
The American project is to that extent diminished.
Of course,
it's a very, very serious problem indeed that the professor has identified.
One reason that Israel is in violation of some of those resolutions, though not that many, not as many as you would think, is because they face the same problem that we do of terrorism, of suicide bombers, of people who are not interested whatsoever in making peace with Israel, but in destroying Israel. Groups like Hezbollah, groups like the Palestinian entity that are basically also partly funded by people like Saddam and indeed the Islamists who want to destroy the state of Israel, and that join with Saddam and the Saudis and many other Arab regimes in a fanatical Hitlerian anti-Semitism that wants to see Israel taken off the map. Now, the other difference is quite obvious. Israel is not threatening the world with giving terrorist entities weapons of mass destruction to destroy other countries and innocent civilians. Saddam is. And that's an absolutely clear distinction which makes the priority, obviously,
However,
defending ourselves.
Israel did illegally and by piracy and deception acquire a nuclear arsenal that's in flagrant violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and maintains it still.
Yes, and if it weren't for that, if it weren't.
It's interesting when Sullivan laughs. This is the second
Nervous
time
laughter.
the nervous laughter.
Can I tell you, quite bizarre. I mean, and I've Sullivan is not good. Andrew Sullivan actually became a pretty robust critic of Israel in the Obama administration. He had a lot of weird reversals. Well, the savagery of what they did in Gaza in 2009 sort of flipped even him a little bit. Yeah. Bizarre.
Of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and maintains it still.
Yes, and if it weren't for that, if it weren't for its defense, it's sitting there with 0.1% of the land that Arabs have. If it didn't have those defenses, it would have been obliterated long ago. And you know it. And you know that these surrounding powers want Israel destroyed. Almost none of them even acknowledge its right to exist, and are fomenting terrorism against its civilians, which is exactly the same as the terrorism fomented against us.
The UN resolutions that have been violated, you talk about, all these violations occurred well before anyone had heard of, or before there was such an organization as Hezbollah, which arose incidentally in response to a completely illegal Israeli aggression and occupation in South Lebanon.
Are you denying that Hezbollah has very close ties with Islamist fundamentalism and terrorism?
Hezbollah, it means party of God. Which
So why are you ambivalent?
I think gives a
about
clue
them,
about his views about theocracy.
You who argue against theocratic terrorism are giving Hezbollah a pass?
Hezbollah was the organizer of the resistance to an illegal, criminal Israeli occupation.
Well, don't you think that
South
Al-Qaeda...
Lebanon. They had every right. They had under international law every right to resist and repel that occupation.
Yep.
Don't you think you could use the same argument about Al-Qaeda resisting the tyranny in Saudi Arabia?
Quite obviously not. Al-Qaeda is not fighting an occupation.
It seems to me
Al-Qaeda is fighting to establish...
You actually defend terrorism when it's directed against Israel, but not against the rest of the world?
It is not terroristic for a Lebanese citizen...
It is not terroristic to have suicide bombing?
It is not terroristic for a Lebanese citizen to resist a foreign occupation of his country. He has international laws on his side. Hezbollah is not about
Lebanese citizens resisting anything. Hezbollah is about the destruction of Israel, the use of terroristic tactics to kill innocent civilians. Now, why can't you condemn that?
That's what I mean by the...
Isn't Hezbollah the enemy?
That's what I meant earlier, Andrew, when I said that the word terrorism has become effectively useless because of propagandization and diminishing
So you will not condemn Hezbollah?
International law gives the right of the Palestinians and the Lebanese to resist
First
occupation.
of all, the Lebanese, as you know full well,
Al-Qaeda
is a complete
Al-Qaeda
euphemism.
is not a guerrilla organization fighting occupation.
Hezbollah is an international terrorist group funded in part from the mullahs in Iran that you despise, and yet you will not condemn it for its suicide attacks on Israel and its use of terrorist tactics.
I'm emphasizing what isn't obvious, Andrew. Okay, I'm
Well, just for the record, what is obvious, that Hezbollah is our enemy.
Gotta go back.
That's an amazing line.
Wow.
Well, that goes back to the opening commentary, though, because the obliterating and Hitchens was such a contradiction. But this again, and of course, we don't have the politics of Hezbollah, and we would condemn many things that Hezbollah does. But yes, there was a fundamental difference in the politics emanating from Iran versus, frankly, the politics emanating from Saudi, and all of it got conflated by propagandists and idiots and reactionaries like Sullivan. But there's a major distinction. I guess that was another thing about Hitchens, is that there was another weird role that he was playing as like this war propagandist, but also still insisting on these distinctions that, of course, the administration he was following was committed to obliterating. But it's fun to watch.
I was going to say, if Hitchens didn't get cancer, the IDW wouldn't be allowed to exist in its current form, because they would, because they
You don't think he would join? He would.
No.
I don't think so at all. I don't think any of them have that in them.
They don't have that capacity.
That's
They don't have that
definitely
capacity.
true. Yeah, I don't think he would, because he
I
also
don't-
wasn't a cheap guy. Like he wouldn't.
Yeah,
he was
I
writing
think
for
he-
Vanity Fair. I mean, he was like an established.
I think he would have
figure.
found it embarrassing.
That's what I
on
mean.
some level, know.
I just want to talk about Hitchens for a second, just because Hitchens for me was very important when I first became a leftist, or started thinking more of myself as on the left wing. I gobbled up so much Hitchens, like vintage 80s, 90s.
Yep.
And what I really appreciate about having gone through that very serious Hitchens phase was having this perspective now. It's like, you don't have any heroes. Like, I can watch an 80s or 90s Hitchens clip and be like, that's our guy. And then I can see him being, disgusting, pandering for war in Iraq, and completely be able to disavow myself from him without having this kind of expectation, right? That anyone
But you're not being truthful, though. You do have heroes. Alexander Coburn.
Well, I do like Alexander Coburn, but Alexander Coburn also was a climate change denier. You know what I mean? And I don't stand, for that either. But I can take people as they were, right? As, flawed people. Right. I will say Richard Seymour's book on Hitchens did sort of sour me a bit on him. But I've been watching some classic Hitch actually in the past couple of weeks.
Take the best, leave the rest. Matt?
No, I just agree with David. So what's the book that?
Yeah, what's the Seymour book?
Oh, it's called Unhitched.
Oh, okay.
It's a great title, and Richard Seymour obviously is a phenomenal writer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a takedown. I thought it was very good. Like, it was in a Hitchens style where he wrote it right after he died.
That's great.
I
don't feel like I just hated him contemporaneously. Because when I exited that phase, there was still several years where he was alive and was just this like obnoxious figure. So like I can kind of come full circle in appreciation, I think partially because I was like years of like, oh yeah, Christopher Hitchens is a fucking asshole. Like,
but Hitchens' argument on reparations is actually really, maybe we should do a Hitchens.
We should. Let's do that. Hitchens is a good post.
I feel similar to David and you. Like, arguably the essay collection, I listened to a lot of that, and I tried to listen to that again recently, and like I love the stuff when he's talking about literature and history, and then he'll get onto like the hijab or something like that, and it's like, god damn, dude. I forgot what I was going to mention after that, but I also about the thing about outgrowing your heroes, and being able to recognize. I think there is something, I don't like, genius is a really loaded term, but like that, what he has, that ability to argue there, is like that. There is something that's why there's the Hitch slap videos on YouTube. That's why like he appeals to like a very adolescent male.
But I have to say, I still would prefer they would be watching that than fucking Ben Shapiro.
Totally.
Jesus Christ. I mean, look at just even the ability to make that analytic distinction is like the IDW does not have that. Period. They don't. Because they don't have any ability to think historically.
Because Hitchens even, I don't know if I wanted to defend him too much, but like even like at his kind of worst, right? When he was talking, like, so for example, Ben Shapiro, who talks about Western civilization, right? And they just throw that term out, versus Hitchens, who would try to articulate the history of Thomas Paine,
right?
And like these Enlightenment values, and he would put it in clear terms for people, versus these people like Ben Shapiro who just leave it up, and basically they put it up and they make it so
Jerusalem and Athens,
Jerusalem and Athens,
Jerusalem and Athens, Jerusalem and Athens. I have to read his fucking book for my book. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.